Welcome back. Got another review for you. This time Blucher, or Blucher, depending on how you want to say it. A game by Sam Mustafa from Honor Games. And I'll put the link to this game and a lot of others done by Sam Mustafa in the description below, so check it out if you're interested. Let's get right into it. First of all, there's a set of rules for Napoleonics. It covers the period 1805 to 1815. But I don't see why you couldn't extend this to the early Napoleonic period, the Revolutionary period, or even afterwards as well. Maybe the Mexican-American War. Who knows? But I don't think it would be difficult to do. It's a hardback. It's a bit smaller than the black powder format book, which is somewhat bigger in dimensions. Again, hardback, really nice. I think it's 176 pages in all, as you can see, with an index. High gloss pages, full color. These pages are pretty thick, which is nice. It won't tear and rip on you. Full color illustrations everywhere throughout the book. As you can see, some nice paintings are in here, as well as pictures for the unit cards, which you can buy separately. I'm not going to go in too much detail on the rules or the gameplay. I'll point out a few things that stand out about the rules, but we'll save that for a much later video. Anyway, there you go. Now, one feature about this actual book that I really like and appreciate is the fact that when you take this to the club, when you bring this to the game table, check it out. Look at that. It just lays flat. Perfect. You're not going to lose your pages. You can have this set up right next to your table and you're good. So that's the first thing that I really enjoy about this book. I've had this book for almost a year now, since it came out, and no loose pages, nothing has popped out of the book on me, so good shape, good production value. The actual book itself, like I said, it does have an index in the back, a one-page index of commonly used terms, as you can see, which is useful. I've used it a few times. That's nice to see. It does have play sheets in the back of the book, which you can download for free as well on the Honor Games website. So that's nice to have. In the beginning here, we have our table of contents, which covers the basic game, which you'll want to play at least once before you go any further with the rules. Then it goes into the advanced game, which is basically how to play with miniatures. Now, the assumption here is that you eventually will play with miniatures, but the rules are described in terms of using the cards, which you can also get on Honor Games' website. And these are used instead of miniatures. And Sam Mustafa has produced a whole bunch of these for all the armies in the book from the period, where you can use these cards instead of miniatures. You have all their stats, special traits, point value if you're using the army building system in the rules, movement rates. Their elan, which is probably the most important stat feature you'll see in the game. It's basically the number of dice you roll in melee, and when you shoot, as it goes down, your unit eventually breaks and it's removed from the table. And this side is used when the unit is hidden. Yes, the rules do use hidden movement, but there is rules in there optionally not using hidden movement. You don't have to use hidden movement rules. So yeah, that's that. Next section we're going to look at. There's a nice introduction, which goes in the turn sequence. It's basically 5 phases in the sequence. Starts off with the information phase, where basically the active side tries to reveal hidden units, things of that nature. Then it goes into the movement phase, followed by fire phase, followed by combat phase, and finally the status phase. That's where you check for reinforcements that might arrive on the table, or to see if one side or the other has broken or lost the game. Now there's 30 turns in the game. That's 15 turns per player, basically. And then the game, a full day of battle is then ended after 30 turns. And you keep track of those during the game. So that's the introduction. It goes about talking about the unit cards, how the information on them is used. It talks about how dice are used, how measurement is made, the representation of units. The standard game, your basic unit is brigades of infantry and cavalry, which is for infantry 2,000 to 3,000 men, cavalry 1,000 to 2,000 men, and artillery are massed batteries of 18 to 24 guns. So this is a grand tactical game, multi-core, army level games, army level battles. You can fight out full battles with these rules. That's the intent of them. If you like tactical level games with formation changing and things of that nature, this set of rules might not be for you. This is about grand maneuver of large bodies of men. And I think it does a really good job at representing battle at that scale. So there you have it. Let's go on a little bit further. Again, we're still in the introduction. It talks about concealed units. Again, the card details. The special traits are defined, like firepower trait, skirmish trait, the steady trait, typical of Russians. Basically, they get an extra dice in close combat if they are defending. In other words, the opposing player charge them. That's nice. It talks about the table size and dimensions. It defines what retired units are, which are basically troops that you pull off the table. If they're far enough away from enemy units, they retire from the table, and you avoid having them break and count towards your army break point value. Yes, this set of rules does use that idea, where an army can be broken if a certain percentage of its units are destroyed. There are also objectives in the game, and these are only important if the battle goes the full 30 turns. If you control all the objectives on the table, you win the battle. So there's another way to win the game. Talks about observation, visibility. There's the army morale. Talks about concealed units, momentum. Basically, when it's your turn, your opponent rolls either 2d6 or 3d6, depending on the size of the battle. And he keeps the result hidden. The result is your momentum points. And the active player, who doesn't know how many points were rolled, actually does things. He activates units within each corps, he activates individual units, and so on, and each of those activations costs so many momentum points. Eventually, he runs out, and as soon as he does, his opponent is obligated to reveal the result of the die roll and basically say his opponent's turn is over, so he can no longer move and activate units. At which time we go into the shooting phase, and then the close combat phase, and the final phase of the game, which is the status phase. And it talks all about that in here. It's one of the unique aspects of these rules that I also really enjoy. Again, there's plenty of illustrations and examples of all this. And after the introduction, it goes into the movement section. And here's where it really gets into the details of each phase, in this case, movement. Each unit of cavalry or infantry or artillery has a movement rate. And the first number is their simple move rate. It's basically their maximum distance they could travel using a simple maneuver. The second number is the difficult move rate, which in this case for cavalry is 2. And it's the rate they can move maximum of if they're using a difficult move, such as moving through rough ground. So that's what these numbers represent. There's horse artillery with 3-1. So there you go. And then it defines difficult moves, what they are. Another thing worth mentioning is reserve moving. It's very useful and really makes having a reserve worthwhile. It basically is a move that allows a unit to move 12 base widths. However, only units that are hidden can use it. So, for instance, if I take some units, put them behind a hill, like a reserve of guard units or something, late in the game, I could use a reserve move and just move across the table, 12 base widths. And that is a reserve move. Really useful. I love that. It could also be used early in the game to change the front line of a battle. Like you could start down here, and in one sweep, you could be over here on his flank. So it's really an effective way of representing battle, the reserve move. I love that. More about movement, the charges, and so on. Nice good section. Rules, how to retire. Then it goes into the next phase, and this is the fire phase. Everything about shooting is in here. Basically, you roll a number of dice equal to your current elan, and every 6 you roll causes a hit on the enemy. In some cases, like heavy artillery or special traits, like if the unit has the skirmisher trait, for French, for example, at long range, they will also hit on the roll of a 5, as well as any 6. The first 5 they roll counts as a hit in addition to the 6 is what I'm trying to say here. So it's very interesting. Artillery fire, infantry fire, the basics of how to fire. One of the things that really stands out for these rules is the simplicity of it. For example, the firing mechanics. There's basically a whole bunch of reasons to have a penalty when you shoot. However, there's only one real effect, and that is you halve your dice. For example, for artillery that is shooting at a target in cover, or that's concealed or obstructed, or an opposing artillery unit, if any of those apply, the shooting artillery halves the number of dice. Just one time, and that's the effect of a penalty. And it's similar for infantry. Bonuses are along the same lines, only instead of halving the dice like you do with a penalty, it's simply that you also hit on the roll of a 5 as opposed to just rolling 6s. And of course, to hit, you need to roll 6. Well, the first 5 you roll, if you have any of these bonuses, allows you to also score a hit. Very easy to remember. It's just a matter of remembering what causes a bonus and what causes a penalty. Very simple. I like it. And of course, there's various traits units might have, like if they're heavy artillery, they gain the bonus. If they have the firepower trait, they gain the bonus, and so on, that they would apply. And of course, there's a little more about shooting, the cover, the effects of effective fire, such as reducing the opposing target unit's elan. Every hit reduces 1 point of elan from the target unit. Very simple and efficient. And then we get into the combat phase, which is your close combat. And they follow along the same lines. Basically, a unit moves into contact with a charge move. And during the combat phase, they'll resolve the combats. And you have your modifiers here. Basically, you'll roll a number of dice each side equal to their current elan. And they'll apply some modifiers, which are dice that you roll. A positive modifier will add a dice, and a negative modifier will remove a dice from your roll. And you need 4 pluses to cause hits in those cases. It shows you how to allocate the dice during multi-unit combats, how to calculate and compare the scores. Really simple stuff, easy to remember. It's a joy to go through the combats of this system. And then it goes into advancing, which is what the winning side does in a combat, and a retreat, which the losing side does in a combat. And these are close combat, not in shooting. Tells you how to carry them out. And finally, we have rules to complete the basic game. Simple things like adding urban areas, how to garrison built-up areas and such, as well as river crossings, how to set up quick games or pick-up games, how to calculate victory and defeat. And I covered that with the objectives in the break point of the army. And that's pretty much it. And then you're ready to get into the advanced game. Before we get into the advanced section of the rules, it's worth pointing out some basics of the system. And that is how units are represented and how we measure distances in this game. And this is one of the parts I really love about this game. Now, for instance, up here we have a possible way to represent an infantry brigade. And it could look like that, or it could also look like this, or even that. The basing of your figures really doesn't matter. What it does determine is the base measurement you will be using in the game. This system uses what's called base widths for its movement rates and its shooting ranges. And a base width is literally the frontage of the base you're using to represent units. If this was a unit, say I wanted this to represent an infantry brigade, that distance would be your base width. And in that case, that's 6 centimeters. That's convenient for me because I have these little made-up measuring sticks. As you can see, that's one base width distance right there. If I wanted this to represent a unit, this frontage would be 3 centimeters. I could use that as my basic unit of measurement. And I could use this little stick to do the same thing, as you can see. And of course, I could have units look like this, or I could double rank them like this, just because it looks good, if I wanted to. Basing and the way you represent units is really irrelevant, but the only thing that counts is their frontage. That is the base width used for all your measurements in the game. Now we get into this section that's called the advanced game, and this is about half of the book, or a little bit more than half of the book. There's a lot of goodies in here. For example, like I said, the game assumes that you're going to be using cards, so there is a section on using miniatures. I think most people will use miniatures with this game. It's pretty much a miniatures-based game. And down here we have a section about unit sizes and base widths, how it works, like I showed you. And the size of tables you're going to use. For instance, like I showed you here, if I was using that to represent a brigade with 3 centimeters being a base width, I'd basically be playing a battle on a 2x3 table, approximately. So you can have full battles on little tiny tables if you wanted to, with something like this, very reminiscent of DBA in a way. Bigger tables, like if I wanted to use 6 centimeter base widths, would be a standard 6x4 table with this unit frontage. Yeah, it talks all about that in this section of the rules, as you can see. What else have we got here? How to represent elan loss without using roster sheets. You could use markers. I use these little dice pods. Put a little micro dice in there to show elan. Current elan works for me. I really like that. It talks about stacking when you're not using cards. The actual advanced rules, such as taking into account weather, scale variations, where a unit can represent 1,200 to 2,000 men if you really want to represent smaller battles, or bigger units, 3,000 to 5,000 man infantry units. So really those big battles. It talks about that. It talks about reinforcements and how they are brought onto the table, how that works. It talks about multiplayer games, entrenchments like you'd see at Borodino and such, mixed brigades like you see with the Prussian army, how rally works, where a unit can bring back lost elan. Some sub-commanders have this ability as well. They can rally a unit they're with and bring back some elan. Usually it's a die roll to see if they can pull that off, though. It talks about artillery and how they work in the game and how you can convert actual historical orders of battle into game turns. Nice section here. Overstrength and understrength units, typically used in scenarios that you create or historical recreations. That's a section there. Army exhaustion. After about 20 turns, the armies have less momentum dice available to them, so they can accomplish less. This is an optional rule if you want to use that. Be a little bit more realistic. In the next section, we talk about personalities like Napoleon and Kutuzov, all the major generals that were leading armies during the age. They oftentimes are represented with special abilities. Like, for instance, if we look at Napoleon here, one of the cards, and again, I use these during games as informational cards. In this case, in the early Napoleon, there's 2 versions of them. This is the early. He has the legend ability and excellent staff work. And if we look this up, we'll see here excellent staff work. Basically, the first core activation the French army makes, if Napoleon's leading, they can use excellent staff work, and that allows them to activate any number of units for just 2 momentum. Normally, with a core activation, it would cost 1 point per unit. But in this case, no matter how many units, it only costs 2 momentum. Fabulous little special ability there. And of course, legend allows him, the army he's leading, to break when they lose half of their units, as opposed to normal, which is 1/3 of the units, or 30%. And then it talks about sub-commanders, which basically work the same way, a similar way. They're represented on the table with a marker like a figure, and they have special traits as well, such as being vigorous or being inspiring or a hero, like Ney. Ney has the hero ability. That allows him to rally a unit, for instance, since we were talking about rallying. Ney's good at that. Artillery officers, cavalry officers, and so on. And now we get into the section about army building. Now this whole section is about army lists. Here we have the Austrian army list. This is the basic layout. It tells you how many corps you can have at a minimum that you have to have. The minimum corps size, 4 units, in this case of the Austrians. Maximum sub-commanders, only 1 for them. And the point values of the various sub-commanders. The Archduke Charles, he's not a sub-commander, but he's a C&C. You could take him for 25 points to lead your army. And he has the mobile trait. and so on and so forth. So it has a whole section on all the armies that you'll find during the 1805 to 1815 period, and sometimes a couple versions of the same army. For instance, the early French from 1805 to 1812, and we have the later French army from 1813 to 1814. Two different armies, some different sub-commander choices. And during the late period, Napoleon only has the legend ability. Whereas before, if you remember, he has legend and staff work. So it represents that fairly well. It talks about how your army's organized with guard corps and guard artillery and reserve corps of artillery, or cavalry rather, and unique features of each army, so it would be more historical or realistic on the table. And armies are typically built on either 300 points or smaller games of 200 points, which is generally your smallest size game. And then we have the Ottomans, and we have Prussians. The British are in there, the Prussians, the Russian army list, which I've used quite a lot, and I enjoy. So again, special rules for the army as they apply. We got the Spanish, who are actually a very cool army. They got all kinds of special abilities here. Extra terrain choices, and they represent guerrillas with all kinds of special abilities, like being able to delay the enemy. No prisoners, counterstroke, ambush, all kinds of fun things here. I love it. And it's got a nice little convenient summary of how army building works. This is mainly intended for people that want a quick pickup game. It works great. It's very smooth, quick and easy to build a list. As you can see, the point values of the units are simple numbers. They're not going to be modified, like Prussian guard units or grenadier units are 18 points each. And this gives a Elan rating, their maximum Elan, and any special traits like firepower and steady and shock, and so on. So it's a good section of the rules. Now we get to a really interesting section of the rule book. This section is called Scharnhorst, and this is the campaign or the mini-campaign section of the rules. I've used this a couple times now, and it's extremely enjoyable, quick and fast. Takes about 20 minutes to play. And basically what this represents is it represents the pre-battle maneuvering of, well, they call them columns here, but you can imagine corps and divisions moving about this limited area on a map, trying to jostle for position prior to an actual battle. It's kind of a game in itself. It does generate victory points for your side as you go into an actual battle on the tabletop. It's a very fun, fast-moving thing. Basically, both sides divide their army into 1 to 4 columns, as they're called, and they'll move these columns on a map. And eventually, one player declares a battle. And it's literally a 2 by 3 block area on the map that you're playing on, and that literally represents your tabletop that you're playing on. And the player who declares a battle defines that area, and all the units currently in there when it is declared as a battle are frozen. They can't move anymore. And the rest of the units outside of that area are allowed to move one last time to get as close as they can to this tabletop battlefield area. And if they manage to get adjacent to it at least, there's a chance they will arrive as reinforcements during the actual battle. It takes a while to get them on, but eventually they usually arrive, and it really makes for a dramatic, fun, intense game. I can say so myself. Here it talks a little bit more about reinforcements, how to lay out terrain and such for the battle, as well as objective markers, how they play a role in the campaign version of the game, and how victory is determined, and so on. And then it has a nice little section called Historical Scenarios. Now this is where you can literally convert actual battles from history into the tabletop. Give you some advice. It actually has a nice little example in here. I believe this is from the Peninsular. I believe. So there is an example in here with example orders of battle, if you're interested in historical battles. The Appendices has a nice little section of frequently asked questions. All kinds of things that you can if you have a question about, you can probably find in here. And again, here we are at the play sheets. And there is a section for how unit costs are calculated in case you want to build your own armies or variants of armies. So there's the point values and how they come up with them, which is nice to have. So there it is, folks. More play sheets in the back. And this is what you get when you buy the Blucher game. It's a very solid product, very high quality production. It is a fast, fun, enjoyable game. Has a lot of historical feel, a lot of depth. It's very subtle in its details, actually. And it's a game you could quickly get hooked on if you play it a few times. Very enjoyable and very challenging. And another thing I really enjoy about this is that it's the kind of game that you can set aside for a couple months, come back to, and just drop right into the game without any problem. You don't have to play this on a regular basis to keep up with the rules. It's that simple. My final verdict on this product is it's awesome. And I really feel that this set of rules should be on every wargamer's bookshelf. Even if you don't play it very often, it's worth having because of its mechanics. And it is a wonderful set of rules, if I say so myself. And speaking personally, I would say that if it wasn't for this set of rules, I probably would not be doing Napoleonics at the moment. This is the set of rules that really convinced me to take the plunge and try it. And you know what? I haven't looked back since. For an army level game, this set of rules is very good, and I highly recommend it. So there you go, folks. I hope this little review kind of helped you. So if you're on the fence about Blucher, I say give it a shot. Go out there and take a look at it, buy it, and get it on your bookshelf. Give it a read for a half an hour and try a game. Even get some of the cards and set up a quick battle and see if it's worth getting deeper involved with. It was for me. I really enjoy it. But there you go, folks. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments section. I'll be sure to definitely get back to you. I hope you enjoyed. And I hope it informed you, if not entertained you, this little review. Okay, folks. Take care.